This is John Musgrave. Thank you for coming to the podcast. If you like this content or this episode, please click like or even subscribe or hit that thumbs up button on your screen, and that'll help more people find us. Thanks for listening. So finishing off Obadiah, and you guys rightly got on this quiz that Obadiah is concerned with Edom and Edom's response at the time of the destruction of the temple, which was what year?
586.
Good, 586. And how should Edom have responded when the temple was destroyed and God's people were carried off into exile?
Not the way they did.
Yeah, what was that?
Compassion.
Yeah, with compassion. And why? Why Edom toward Israel?
They're brothers, so to speak. They're cousins.
Yeah, they're brothers, cousins. So Israel's brother, Jacob, Israel, same guy. His brother is Esau, and Esau's descendants are the Edomites. Okay, and so the Edomites should not be treating their brothers in such a way. And so as the towns of Judah were being, the last little towns of Judah were being conquered by the Babylonians, the Edomites were coming in after the Babylonians and picking up the scraps and looting. And then when they were carried off into exile, the Judahites, the Edomites were mocking them along the way. Okay, and rejoicing that Jerusalem had been destroyed. So here's a map for us. So you see here, Israel is this little tiny sliver over here. Babylon's way over here. Here's Assyria up here. Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. Assyria, the first major kingdom, and then Babylon after that, and then Persia. The Medes and the Persians are over here. Okay, but there's Jerusalem, and Edom is this area down here. So here's the Sinai Peninsula, Saudi Arabia today, there. And Edom is this area that's just kind of east of it, and it's creeped under the south edge of Judah. Here, the south edge of Judah in the Promised Land. So I think I have another slide here for you. So there's Edom. And yeah, there we go. So up close, there you can see. So Edom's down here. And so this is, zoomed way in, but you've got Jerusalem here. Here's Judah. And then Edom's on this south edge and then toward the east as well. Yeah, Matthew.
The invading armies always came in from the north, correct?
That's right. And there was just some topographical territory that was hard. It was hard to go straight across. And so they would come up, that's why you have these arrows. They would come up like this and then come down. And so that's why you see in the prophets, the invaders are coming from the north. Because they just had, that was the route to come in. And if you get close we will get back to your question, Matthew. When you get close here, you see that, there's a river here to cross. And here's the Dead Sea, and up above this, the Jordan River. Up above this map is the Sea of Galilee, and so they just they went north of that, and then came down here west of the Jordan, and worked their way down. Okay, Matthew.
I think that's what called the King's Highway, right?
Yeah, there's a King's Highway as one, and it's one of the reasons that the Promised Land is so important, because it really connected Africa with everything else. With there's a land route to Europe and to all of Asia. Yeah.
But so when they were exiled, they went north and then over, right? So the Edomites had to really go out of their way to mock and pillage them. So this isn't just a mocking of opportunity, which is arguable, okay, but they really went out of their way. So there had to have been a lot of animosity at that point, correct?
Yeah, and there was through time. David had dominated the Edomites, and then they had rebelled under some wicked kings and quit paying tribute, and there was some back and forth there. Yeah.
So is there any indication, now obviously, not victim blaming here, but is there any indication that some of the way that the Edomites treated the Judahites when they were being exiled is somewhat of a natural repercussion of maybe the Judahites' improper treatment of the Edomites?
No, actually, to the contrary.
Okay.
So we see a very consistent in the Old Testament portrayal of, and it's accurate. I don't mean to say portrayal like it's false, showing that Esau and his descendants were very much alike. Esau was a brute, right? He was a hunter, and he said, I'd rather have stew than my birthright. And when the Israelites are coming out of under Moses, they're coming out of let's see if it's on here. It's not. They're coming out of Egypt, and they come to the border of Edom, and they say, "Hey, brothers, let us pass through. We won't. We'll pay for anything we take, but we're just going to stay to the road. Just let us through. We're not here to create war with you." The Edomites won't do it, and they go back and forth, and they say, "No, please, we'll anything we take, we'll pay for. I think with silver and that kind of thing." And the Edomites say no, and so the Edomites are constantly not acting toward their brother Israel as they should.
Is it correct to say that Esau's greatest sin is in fact selling his birthright because it wasn't his to give away, correct? In the sense that
It wasn't his. I'm just processing words. Sorry,
Well-
it wasn't. Well, it was his to give away. He was firstborn, and so the automatic firstborn is the firstborn.
right,
But the firstborn, the term firstborn, can go to any of the sons. Okay, and you see that consistently through Scripture. And it's just a son has a firstborn right. That is, and when you're the firstborn, you're the inheritor. So Reuben should be the firstborn, but he loses his firstborn rights by sleeping with his stepmother, right? And it eventually goes, immediately it goes to Ephraim, and Joshua takes it forward. But the long-term plan is it goes to Judah, who has the kingship there.
I guess what I was getting at is when you see God is very against, for instance, the various tribes giving away or divesting the land that was given to them by God, and to me I see a similar thing here. Esau is the firstborn, it's his birthright, and he literally gives it away for lentils.
Yeah, and the word God uses is he despised his birthright. God gave him a gift, and he said, "What's this piece of crap?"
Good lentils.
Right? Yeah, and so that's it. He despised his birthright, and so that was a big deal. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Laura.
Sort of follow up. You were saying David conquered the Edomites at some
Yeah,
point. So was
yeah.
that
I think you can find that in 2 Samuel 8, in that list of all the nations that David conquered, and
was a good thing?
that was a good thing. Yeah. And so that's God saying, "Hey, you know what? These guys are troublemakers, and I'm going to let you not let your brother play with you and your friends today." Yeah. Okay. Good. Notes on the book. So we talked about this, that the Day of the Lord. So here in Obadiah we see Day of the Lord referred to, and it's not talking about Jesus. It's not talking about Jesus. And so Obadiah 15, and open your Bibles to Obadiah if you haven't already. Obadiah comes after what book? Who lands? Yeah. Who lands on the bed? Amos. Yeah, Amos. Okay, so Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, and then what happens next? Jonah. Yeah, the whale lands on the moose on the bed. Okay, so Obadiah 15. The day of the Lord is near for all nations, as you have done. So this is God talking about Babylon's conquering. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you've done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. So speaking later, it will be holy. The house of Jacob will possess its inheritance. There will be no survivors in the house of Esau. So speaking of two eras here going on, first is the conquering of all the nations through Babylon up in verse 15, and that's a day of the Lord. God visits in judgment. He blesses Babylon with great victories everywhere they go. And all these nations are conquered by Babylon, which is something you see in other prophets as well, them talking about this. And then, but, verse 17, this won't be forever. On Mount Zion, there will be deliverance from this day of the Lord that they've experienced in 586. Okay. Mount Zion or Jerusalem will be holy or set apart. Jacob, the house of Jacob, will possess its inheritance. They'll come back from exile and they'll possess their inheritance, which is, what's Jacob's inheritance? Lottery ticket? The promised land. Yeah. The inheritance is promised land. Okay. It's always the case. Okay. Inheritance is promised land. And there will be no survivors from the house of Esau. So they'll be judged in a devastating kind of way. So second day of the Lord comes in 17 and 18. God visits again in 539. And when he visits, who does he judge? Two nations primarily he judges in 539. Yeah, Babylon he judges. And then end of verse 18. Yeah, Edom. Yep. Okay. And so, and then who does he bless in 538? Judah, Israel. Yeah. And you could say the Persians as well, because they conquer Babylon. All right. So just note this. This is typical in dealing with the prophets. Okay, it's not an instruction manual that says, first do this. Take screw C1 and put it in hole 7. Okay, and that's what we look for mistakenly because we don't have a clue about how God writes in the prophets. But note here, just in the span of 15, 16, 17, 18, 4 verses, that we've got 2 days of the Lord, and that we've got 2 events separated by 50, 60 years. Okay. But how do we know this? Because of the content. Okay. Day of the Lord near for all nations. And we see this in the other prophets. We see this in history, that Babylon comes through and they conquer Edom, they conquer Ammon, they conquer Moab, they conquer Egypt, they conquer Assyria, they conquer Judah. Everything. They just take everything and they sweep through everything. And again, you see this in other prophets like Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and you see it in history too. And so we match that up. We say, what could he be talking about? And that matches. But then you see that 17, but, and you say, I know English. That's the converse of what's going. First, Judah's the recipient of God's curses as Babylon's being blessed and swiping through all the nations. But on Mount Zion, there will be deliverance. It will be holy. The house of Jacob will possess its inheritance. And keep in mind here, this is future tense, will possess its inheritance. And Obadiah is writing after what event? The exile, the destruction of Jerusalem. He's writing after the destruction of Jerusalem during the exile. Remember, he's writing about how the Edomites treated them on their way into exile. And so when Obadiah, in his historical place, see how important it is to understand the history of the writer, when he's writing and who he's writing to. when he's writing to exile, he says, verse 17, there will be deliverance of Mount Zion. Well, Mount Zion was in not one stone left upon another. And so Obadiah here speaks of a future deliverance, and Jacob was not possessing its inheritance when he was writing. Right? They're cleared out of the land, and they're in Babylon. So Obadiah speaks of the future, that God will deliver Mount Zion. There will be glory again to Jerusalem. And when this happens too, God will squash the Edomites, which is something you see in the prophets as well. I believe Ezekiel talks about this also. Okay. And anyone know any modern day Edomites? No. No, you don't. I'll answer for you. You don't know any Edomites. Why? Because of verse 18. They basically cease to be a nation after this period. Okay. All right. So that's Day of the Lord stuff. Second thing to look at. And let's see. Lily, can you read? Or wait. Jerome, I see you back there. Can you read this first bullet up on the screen? Can you see that? Or is that too small?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
As is spoken of in other prophets, Obadiah tells that the restoration would include the possession of the nations, along with Edom, which we'll see in Zephaniah 2.
Okay. So there's thank you. And there's this we see in Zephaniah 2, same thing. And that's a lot. One of the checks you can do when you're reading the prophets is say, does another prophet writing about the same era say something about this? And so we see confirmation from other prophets about this restoration, that when God's people come back, that there would be this glorious restoration where they would possess or dominate the nations, okay, like Solomon had done. Now, in history, do we see that happened? Did Israel dominate the nations and be superior? Were they superior over them from when they returned until the day Jesus came back? No, they were not. Why not? Okay, they disobeyed, and we know the principle of IHCs. There were intervening historical contingencies, and they never experienced this glorious restoration that God foretold in the prophets, like Zephaniah and like Obadiah. Okay. But we'll see this here in Obadiah, what Obadiah says about this possessing of the nations. And Lily, can you read this long passage for us?
19 people from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and people from the foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israelite exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath.
Good.
The exiles from Jerusalem who are in Severest will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord.
Okay. So this is speaking of the restoration when God's people come back from exile. And so the people of the Negev, who knows where the Negev is?
Is it between Egypt and the Promised Land, or on the way, or?
Okay, good. It's southern Judah. Okay, it's the southern desert-y kind of area. Okay, so the Negev, and know that because the Negev is mentioned 100 times in the Bible. Okay, so if you just know that, then you know what they're talking about. Okay, the Negev is the southern area of all the Promised Land, and it's the closest Promised Land area to Egypt. And so that's why, Matthew had that in his head, because that's, it's that southern deserty wilderness kind of area. of Judah. So the people of the Negev will, what's it say? Will occupy the mountains of Esau. So they'll go over, remember that map. So if you remember the map, like Edom was here, the Negev was right next to it. And so it's just saying these people of Judah will come over and they'll occupy. They'll be the landowners there in Edom. They'll possess the land of the Philistines. Anyone know where the land of the Philistines is?
Palestine.
What's that? Yeah, it's on the coast. So the southern coast. So think about the Promised Land in the Mediterranean Sea. Oh, I guess I don't have to use my hands here. So here's the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so up here's Turkey. Here is Israel. And here is Egypt. Okay, down here, the Philistines were this land, right there. Okay, on the corner. Know your geography. I'm just, yeah, that's good. So the Philistines are here. The Negev's like here. Moab is like here. Here's the Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee. Okay, and so people of the Negev will own Edom, and then people from the foothills, and there were various foothills in Israel. There were western foothills and eastern foothills, but the foothills were promised land people that they'll dominate. You know, the Philistines who are here. Yeah, Bill.
Isn't Gaza, the city of Gaza, in Philistine territory?
Yeah. So if you know Gaza, that's Philistia there. You know, it's this corner area, and it's a very strategic area because it's right where the Middle East kind of turns into Africa. And there's this, you know, the Wadi of Egypt is like there. You see that expression there. And the promised land was to go from this place here all the way up to the Tigris River, or the Euphrates River, which was way up there. Okay. So you see this dominance there. Benjamin, which was like here-ish, would possess the land of Gilead, which was here. Okay. And so, anyway, and so on and so on and so forth and so on and things of that nature, right? All right, that's the end of Obadiah. Any questions about Obadiah? So, what's Obadiah about? One word. Edom. Yeah, good. It's about Edom. What event is Obadiah about?
The gloating.
The Lord's Day. Freedom.
Jesus. That's the answer. Jesus. No.
Wait a second. You can't say that.
What event is Obadiah about? What event triggers the book of Obadiah?
The gloating.
Yeah, but that's kind of an event. What historical event was gloated at? What's the event?
The exile.
No. What event?
The destruction of the temple.
The destruction of the temple. Okay, the exile is 70 years. Okay, it's not about the 70 years. It's about Jerusalem being destroyed, the temple being destroyed, and Edom's response to that. What they were like on that day when they were carried off into exile. Okay, so let's do this again. What's Obadiah about? Edom. What event triggers the book of let's do it again. What is Obadiah about? Edom. Okay, remember that Obed-Edom? That's my favorite character in the Bible. Obed-Edom. He's the one who keeps the Ark of the Covenant there when they're bringing it back from the Philistines. And they say, this is pretty dangerous. Let's just leave it here. And then David has to retrieve it. Okay, Obed-Edom is the keeper of that. And he's greatly blessed while he keeps the Ark because he treats it with reverence as he should. But Obadiah is about Edom. Okay, so just a little mnemonic thing that you can have there. Joyce, Matthew's heart rate just went up 200 beats a minute. Okay, get ready. I'm going to ask you again. What's Obadiah about? Edom. What event triggers the book of Obadiah? Temple destruction. Great. All right, you got it. So that's helpful for us as we look at a book of the Bible to know what this book is about. I should write a book called that. Okay. All right. Let's look at.
Stop it.
Would you spiral bind it? The book?
Yeah, because if it's not spiral bound, it's worthless.
Oh, so this is one.
Yes. Well, that stays open. That stays open. A little paperback won't, and so then it's useless. Okay, let's go to Lamentations, and not the end. And we'll just start this today. What's Obadiah about?
Yeah.
What event triggers the book of Obadiah?
Temple destruction.
Temple destruction. Great. What was Edom doing at the temple destruction that triggers the book? Yeah, they were mocking and looting. Yeah, great. You got it.